Alright then, nerds. Let's do some lipids. Now, lipids is a pretty easy topic in biology, I'm not gonna cap. It's pretty easy, but it's very prevalent. It's everywhere. Like, you're gonna need to know this shit. So, if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe to the video, like, all that bollocks, and, make sure you oil up for this one. Pause, no diddy. But yeah, let's get into it. So when I say lipids, I'm kind of talking about like a broad range of these organic compounds, okay? Now, what do I mean by organic? Now, you'd be surprised to know that organic is actually a very cool term, because organic is not something we'd use to say describe water, okay? Water is actually not organic. And let me tell you why. Because organic means carbon containing. So if something contains carbon, that means it is organic. And if something doesn't contain carbon, so something like this or this, that means it's an inorganic compound or whatever. So a lipid is something we call organic because it contains so much carbon. And when we say lipid, right, lipid is kind of like the biggest op to water, okay? Water and lipids, they don't get along. In fact, they hate each other. They are sworn enemies. And so let's get into the general term lipid, this broad range, and let's kind of explore it a bit further, get more specific. Now, this is an important example of a lipid, okay? We have here this weird thing, okay? It looks like a UFO or something. Now, what do all these weird parts mean, okay? What are all these things? So, the part on the left is something we call a glycerol, okay? And the parts that kind of just fly off it like a tail, these three parts is something, I don't want to body shame here, but we call these fatty acids. And I'm not gonna lie, they are, they are pretty pudgy, they're a bit fat. So now exactly how a disaccharide has a glycosidic bond and a polypeptide has a peptide bond, these guys are held together by something called an ester bond. And please do not call it an Easter bond, okay? It's not the Easter bunny, okay? I've seen some stupid mom call it an Easter bond before in an exam, and it's a long day, so don't call it Easter. It's an ester bond, and I'll explain how they form. So this lipid right here is something we call a triglyceride. Now, it's pretty self-explanatory as to why it's called a triglyceride, because tri meaning three, it contains three glycerides, okay? So, I'm gonna delve into this a bit more, but first, I have to kind of jump scare you a bit and show you what it really looks like, because it's not actually a UFO looking thing, okay? It looks kind of crazy, but we'll get the hang of it, okay? So here's the jump scare. So let's do it in chunks first, okay? So what does the glycerol molecule look like? Well, let me show you this. So this is what we call a glycerol molecule, okay? It looks a bit like this, okay? It has these three horny hydroxyls bonded to it, and this is really important because, the hydroxyls are something that can bond with things. And so I suggest you learn this structure of glycerol. It's not very difficult to memorize. It's pretty easy. But this is it. And the fatty acids look a bit like this. Now, aside from him needing to sign up to a Weight Watchers program, there's a few things you can notice about this guy, okay? Now, the thing about this fatty is that it repeats, okay? You've got these CHs that repeat, and this is what we call the hydrocarbon part, okay? And this part is called the carboxylic part, okay? And you've gone through this before. You've actually seen this before in amino acids. You've seen that this part is a carboxylic acid. Now, you might think that, it has a polar part, okay? This oxygen is he's a strong boy, and this carbon, he's a weak boy. And so there's a polarity, but that doesn't necessarily mean it is soluble in water, because this entire hydrocarbon, this hydrophobic hydrocarbon, which is non-polar, it actually displaces this part that is polar. And so the overall effect is that it is insoluble in water, okay? Now, if you didn't understand that part, okay, fine, we chillin'. Just understand that this part is insoluble in water, okay? So this hydrocarbon part can kind of just go on for ages and ages and ages. Now, the cool thing about this hydrocarbon part is that there can be a double bond, okay? There can be a double bond somewhere in the structure, and it kind of just mucks everything up and causes the structure to kind of do something, we call it kink, okay? Now, don't get any ideas, okay? Pause, no diddy. Kink means the chain bends, okay? It bends and it starts to kind of just, muck up, okay? And that's all because of this double bond here. And so we have names for that, okay? If a hydrocarbon only contains single bonds, we call it saturated. And the way you can remember that is easy. Single, saturated, S, it starts with an S. And if it has a double bond, we call it unsaturated, because it doesn't start with an S, so we don't call it single bonds. It's just double. It has a double bond somewhere in the kink. We call it unsaturated. So if you understand that, you're chilling. Now let's move on. So let's set them up on a date, okay? Fatty acid and glycerol, okay? We're setting up on a date, okay? And these hydroxyls, right? These horny hydroxyls, I like to call them horny hydroxyls because they're quite attracted to things. And what they do is they are attracted to each other and they combine together to release a molecule of water, leaving behind an oxygen. And this is what we call an ester bond. That's what an ester bond looks like, okay? It's kind of got this weird cocoa bond, yeah? Cocoa bond, CO, okay? That is an ester bond. And that's the bond you can see in this weird UFO structure, is this little bond here. That's what we call the ester bond, and that's what it looks like. Now, if a fatty acid can get a date, and he's fat, and you can't get a date, then bro, you gotta lock in, alright? So, just go up to the 10 out of 10 Latina baddie, bro. Like, next time you see her, just talk to her. Anyways, because this reaction releases a molecule of water, we call it a condensation reaction. We went through this before, and you can go through this again. Just watch my videos on monosaccharides, but this is called a condensation reaction because it releases a molecule of water, okay? It gets wet. But this specific reaction that happens here between a fatty acid and a glycerol is something called esterification. This is what we call esterification. We make an ester, okay? So, yes, it's a condensation reaction, but condensation is too broad, too general. We want to be specific. Oh, it's called esterification. Boom, that's it. All you need for your exam. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a triglyceride without 3 of these bad boys, okay? So there's a whole Diddy party in this, So there are 3 of these fatty acids. There's one here, another one here, and the third one here. And they all have their available hydroxyls on the carboxylic acid, and they react with the hydroxyls on the glycerol. Now, what you need to really understand is that they release 3 water molecules because 3 different condensation reactions are happening. Therefore, they release 3 waters. And of course, you can do the opposite. You can put in water to break them. So yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know about these bad boys. These triglycerides are typically found in your oils, your fats, sort of your lard, your butter, all these different things. And some of them are solid, some of them are liquid, and that depends on the double bonds that are in them. It's all this kind of cool thing that I highly suggest you look at. But one thing that I want to kind of, have a bit of a giggle about, have a gander, and this isn't part of your specification, but basically, when you take this triglyceride, and I'm sure like some of you who watch Fight Club will know about this. By the way, that movie was pretty cool. But if you take this triglyceride and you were to combine it with sodium hydroxide, what you'd actually create is soap. You'd create soap, and you can do this at home. Literally, just get like a bunch of oil and combine it with sodium hydroxide. I don't know where the fuck you'd get that from, but get sodium hydroxide from somewhere. Okay, it's pretty, it's pretty cool. You combine it and you create soap. For some of you weirdos who are looking to start a soap business, or maybe some of you want to impress the 10 out of 10 Latina baddie, make soap for her. It's pretty cool, pretty awesome. So now you know how to create a bar of soap from home. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the video then. If you enjoy it, make sure you subscribe to the video, like, all that bollocks, and I'll see you in part 2.